Hello everyone, welcome to our first episode. One of the most important legislative act Government of India passed in 2000 is Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now, as part of India's commitment to international community to prevent money laundering activities in the country, and to have we have it for an insightful conversation. We have an eminent lawyer, Annindya Banerjee sir. Annindya sir has over 25 years of experience in legal domain, mainly with HDFC Limited, where he headed the legal department and established the corporate legal team. He has extensive experience in AML compliance, among other things, and has built some fundamental blocks related to KYC AML aspects with the regulatory authorities, which compliance folks like us use daily in our operations, about which we will request him to talk about it more. Currently, he is a partner with Capital Law Chambers LLP. Hello, sir. It's an honor to have you in our first podcast.
Thank you, Rajiv. Very kind words, and I'm so glad that I'm here with you. And this is the first episode that you're doing, so all the more thankful
Yes.
to you. And I also understand the responsibility that you're casting upon me. So I hope I'm able to, do justice with with your ask. So yes, very, very thankful to be here.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's get started. So, sir, your experience spans over more than 2 decades since 1999, right? Now, you have seen phases of PMLA Act being passed, KYC directions being introduced by the regulators, by all the financial regulators, right? And you yourself has been in the forefront of implementing so many KYC related or AML related, policies, procedures across your stint in HDFC at HDFC. Now, how would you, if you can summarize India's journey since signing the commitment with international community on money laundering, how does our Indian laws reflect the requirements of FATF in letter and spirit? If you could summarize this over the past 2 decades or more.
Yeah, so I was, I guess, fortunate enough to have seen some aspects of this law play out. Some of it, some aspects and some facets very closely, very intrinsically, because the industry that I was working in, housing finance sector, has seen a lot of action. I mean, proceeds of crime and property is something that at times they go very intertwined in nature. As a result of which you've gone through uh, the 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 entire process from end to end in various capacities. I was also fortunate enough to have participated with the FIU itself in structuring the uh, red flag indicators of suspicious transactions for the housing finance sector as against a larger narrative which could pertain to bank accounts, etc., etc. The very fact that how the sector in itself could also be impacted, and what are the key indicators right up front. That aside, I've actually seen the law evolve step by step by step. See, if we go back in time, money laundering, the concept, the way it emerged uh, in a developed economy scenario, India as a developing nation had to do a catching up act. So while we were initially the observer, then we became a full member, then we had the law, we implemented the law, we had amended it. We've since, I think, amended it four times. And I think because law, as any student of law, I call myself a student of the law. Like any student of law, you must realize that the entire legal narrative, the landscape of law is perpetually evolving. And this is a concept which is not a crime on the body or a crime on the property of an individual, which is the traditional narrative of any criminal law and the jurisprudence around it. This is something larger in context. This is a global play. This is about money moving suddenly. This is no longer about cash moving in trunks. This is about cryptocurrency now. This is about money flowing like at that speed, at lightning speed, from one part to the other. And you see that India, I mean, there is a lot of talk that, we have the law, so in letter we are there, but in spirit, are we there or not? I very firmly believe with the way this law has amended itself, and in just 2002, which is very recent in the history of Indian laws, it's rather recent. And the way our legislature has kept on altering it, our judiciary has been mindful that how this is different, how this has to be seen apart and in distinction from the previous laws that we have known and been comfortable with dealing in the manners and forms in which a set of people are supposed to be acting and dealing with things. I think in spirit, we have gone all guns blazing to show how committed as a nation we are in targeting money laundering as an offense, in combating terrorism, in identifying, in actually showcasing ourselves as a nation, that how serious we are about this entire issue. We have a regulator which is talking to each sectoral regulator in turn, that what are the things that they need to do. They are hand holding them. They are putting all the triggers. They are putting a lot of serious action in place, where you have mandates that each sectoral regulator is asking the regulated entities that you need to be mindful of certain set of transactions. You need to report, say, a cash transaction of a particular threshold and value. You need to be mindful of what is a suspicious transaction, coming back to, where I've done some extensive work. So I think it is a dynamic law. It is something which was not contemplated even when our country was born. We had a concept of FERA, but FERA primarily was because foreign exchange was limited. So it had to be regulated. Then the country evolved. We opened up our economy. 91 heralded a sea change in the entire dynamics of this nation. We also moved onward. From regulation, we came to manage. We said that, okay, fine, I don't need to behave like a hawk anymore. Let it flow. We will see how it needs to move from one place to another. So we will manage. And then this whole animal of money laundering came in, where there was a very critical reason to see this aspect distinct from what we had known through and through in our legal jurisprudence and in our understanding, a lot of which is legacy in terms of how the law was outside India. We borrowed certain aspects. Our constitution itself was reflective of many aspects of the entire globe. And today, I feel the kind of amendments that this law has seen, uh, the way the Supreme Court has also intervened in various matters, plus minus both sides, how banks have to be protected in certain cases, how the law must override anything else. So it's balanced things. The judiciary that way must be lauded, that they have also been ahead of times to kind of take this narrative forward. So I think yes, in letter, of course, we are there. In spirit, I mean, we are totally on the right path.
Yes, you made two, three very interesting points. So it's not just about cash, which was the traditional form of, laundering India traditionally had, but now it has gone into digital payments so extensively, like crypto assets. This is something currently only FIU is mainly regulating. And then another point you made is the evolvement of FEMA based on the FERA. So from regulation to management of foreign exchange has led to the growth of foreign exchange, but also the challenges along with it in terms of but the central bank, which is considered as a very conservative regulator, is always making amendments, bringing in new regulations and being very conservative, is catching up, is always proactive in terms of bringing out new regulations, which will be prudent for the stability of the payment systems or markets. So yes, very insightful point. So now to start off with the uh, PMLA and what constitutes money laundering, the basic definition itself. Now, these there are obviously very interesting observations in quite a few case studies, in few cases. What are the essential components that constitute money laundering? Like, how would you, explain the definition of money laundering in the simplest manner? You can use a case or as well. This is something we have also discussed.
So money laundering, the way it started, uh, there has to be first a predicate offense. And in that predicate offense, there must be some person who would have some direct or indirect involvement in dealing with proceeds of crime. And then the intention to, showcase it as something which is untainted. The very concept of laundering. And if you go back in time, you would realize that where did it start? It was actually a laundromat in which money, I mean, people who were using it, then the cash from illicit trade was being put into the same thing and then deposited into the banking machinery and being taken out as if it's absolutely untainted. Everything was coming from the laundromat. So that is the concept of money laundering. And from there to where it is today, it has also traversed a lot. So that is essentially the essential characters. But we have to break it down further. Placement, like in the example just we discussed, that there's a normal money and there's illicit money which is coming in. So somebody is placing it. Then you're layering it with multiple. In today's scenario, you have multiple group companies through which money is moving. You were trying to create a trail in terms of which money is moving from X to Y to Z to a variety of links, and then again getting split. That suppose what was 100 has been broken into 10 into 10, and as a result it becomes very tough to trace it back to the predicate offense, to the crime from which this money has come in. And then it comes and sits as part of normal day in day out stuff like real estate, where uh, I mean, so much I've seen that people would just park, and you'll get the investigating agencies. Thankfully, the investigating agencies have been really amazing in their act, where they do this tracing, where they take the trail of the money, and they are able to trace their steps back. You see, what the investigating agency is doing is actually trying to redraw what happened, and at times it could go back ages. It could actually, like in one particular case, I realized that there was a seller of a property, there was a buyer of a property, and 10 years had since lapsed. The buyer had taken a loan, which is where I was involved. But the seller had acquired this property from some illicit money, which was traced to some arms drop. And that trail, the agency was able to, draw the thing out, and it came back to this gentleman, who, of course, possibly wouldn't have known, giving benefit of doubt here because I really don't know that aspect of it. But the fact was, this asset, as a result of this, was a subject matter of proceeds of crime, and absolutely under the ambit of PMLA. So these are the various aspects. And now with the amendment in the section, it is no longer that somebody has to showcase this as untainted. The very fact if somebody is sitting on it, concealing it, is in itself an offense under money laundering. And if you ask me, rightly so. I don't need to go and create a poster that everything is fine. The very fact that there is a proceed of crime, and it is something that somebody is sitting upon, concealing and not disclosing, is crime in itself. Which I think also shows how, again, going back to your first question, how mindful the country has been in also identifying this and bringing in an amendment. And this is a rather recent amendment, it's not very dated either, to showcase how India is so conscious about all aspects of money laundering.
Yeah, another point on in the part of the definition is the property you gain based on the illicit proceeds of crime. Now, there are very interesting observations in the case of Vijay Madanlal versus Union of India. So, yeah, if you could shed some light on that. So, there is one direct or indirect way of gaining property from the proceeds of crime, and what the legal authority can do in terms of, let's say, attachment or seizure. Uh, this is something very interesting part of the definition of money laundering. If you could, speak on
So,
that.
so exactly, it comes to that. What is the proceeds of crime? It really comes down to that whether something in a particular scope may be subject to attachment, but will it tantamount to being a proceeds of crime or not? I think has been very nicely showcased by the particular judgment that it's a landmark judgment in setting the narrative of the entire law, and how it's a law which has to be seen separately from other laws that we know of or we are more acquainted of. So proceeds of crime has to be something which is derived or obtained as a result of an underlying criminal activity. And that has to be from a scheduled offense. It is not like the way I think the judgment also talks about a tax offense. Now, a tax offense, because it's not scheduled, will not be investigated under this. Yes, the tax authorities will see so. But to also, like, another fantastic example within the judgment is about the vehicle, that there's a vehicle which is used and it is recovered, it is attached by the investigating agency, it also pertains to a criminal activity, but whether it is a proceed of crime to come under the ambit, it is not a proceed of crime. Why? Because it is not derived or it is not obtained as a result of a criminal activity emanating from in relation to a scheduled offense. So that's a classic line I think the judgment has drawn out, and it's very clear. It gives a lot of perspective in what exactly is the play. Where does the offense? I mean, as much as Section 3 has been widened in scope, but at the same point in time, it's not that any officer can suddenly, the judgment says that it's not any police officer can suddenly take cognizance of a money laundering offense. You have to be somebody within the purview of the act. You assume to understand the parameters of the act. You have to record your reasons. It has its own set of checks and balances, so to say, and then it has that very decisive perspective that it gives. There's not anything and everything that you can bring under this act. You have to be very mindful that it has to be property which is derived or obtained as a result of some criminal activity, which in turn is emanating from a scheduled offense. So I
Yeah.
think it's a very, very nice narrative. It gives a lot of perspective, a lot of clarity. You can debate it both ways. And of course, law, as I said, is evolving. It may evolve further. But considering the nature of this law, the amplitude, the entire map is the playground. The entire global map is the playground of this law, so to say. So it possibly requires that kind of a narrative, that kind of applicability, and it also has that checks a balance in terms of which it must go back to a scheduled offense. And the scheduled offense is something which globally people are identifying, that you have to trace it back. You have to trace it back to a scheduled offense. So yeah, that's I think a very critical aspect of what proceeds of crime is, and I think it's very nicely elaborated and enunciated in that particular order.
Yeah, yeah, and it must be a humongous challenge for the legal authorities in India to come up with what is derived from proceeds, illegal proceeds, and what is not, and specific, and considering the kind of crimes which takes place in the country, it must be a humongous challenge for the authorities.
Absolutely, and also what has come and see as a law. this is not something which is restricted to the Indian territory. It kind of has an extraterritorial jurisdiction also, so as to have that play, how the countries can speak to each other. So that thing, that aspect is also there in this law in its own way. That's not all and sundry you can reach out to. There's a particular method to the madness, so to say. And but that's the thing, that's the map. The entire global map is the playground of this
Yes.
law, which is why India as a developing nation, I think, has taken tremendous strides in coming right up front, showcasing the seriousness. And I'm seriously amazed the way, the number of times the law has been amended just to showcase how serious we are about as a nation.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about how the law plays out outside India, how it is catching up with criminals, in their investigation. Yes, definitely. If you can explain us what are the main objectives of PMLA and how it has lived up since its, you know, passing in the parliament and going through amendments has lived up to its status over these decades.
Uh, Very honestly, the object of money laundering is something extremely critical in a nation like India, which is making strides in showcasing itself as a serious economy, and the way the Indian story has been. Uh, we are in the center of literally all kind of financial discussions. We as a developing nation and the kind of objects that we have in mind. So coming back to this thing, I think India has done fantastically well in saying that we are completely committed to this problem of money laundering and countering financial terrorism, so to say. Uh, I think the way the law has amended from time to time shows how flexible our narrative has been, shows how mindful we have been in the changing dynamics, like the whole group concept, where if there are thresholds of a parent company, the same thresholds are expected to be applied for subsidiaries in India. That is, I think, tremendous the way India has played this out. Yeah.
Mhm. So how does PMLA interact with other laws, like you have Benami transactions laws or any anti-corruption law? Some aspects are covered in income tax as well. How does it? What does that play? How does it
Again,
interact
you
with?
have to go back to the predicate offense. So the
Okay.
three parts of the schedule, the first part, the second is customs, the third is the cross-border. The first aspect again has, I think, some 20 or 29 odd paragraphs or something, which again takes various aspects of from various laws and calls them the predicate offense to trigger the money laundering provisions as well. So that is how the interplay of the various laws are as far as money laundering is concerned. See, as I said, it has to be a scheduled offense.
Yeah.
If it's not a scheduled offense, the scheduled offense is where the other laws come in. They come in very handy. That if there's an offense in that particular law, whether it finds a reference in this particular act, that is where the two acts combine. And so one is the FIR under the predicate offense, and then the ECIR under this money laundering. And at times, you can also have an attachment where the basic assessment of under the predicate law, predicate offense may still be continuing. But because the nature of this law is such, you may need some immediate action. So you have the authority, the power to freeze, that you can't deal. You have the power to seize and let the trial continue. We will deal with it. But at the same point in time, you must be very mindful that the property should not go. And the property could be anything. So, yeah, so that's how the interplay happens between various laws. But the entire ED piece sits aside and it connects the dots. It keeps, so all the suspicious transactions, all the reporting that various organizations need to do, The ED, the FI, the FATF, FIU are continuously connecting the dots that whether there is something larger, whether there is something more than what is apparent. Because in one particular case, in one jurisdiction, it might be a small piece. But when you connect the dots, that's when the larger picture emerges.
So, in the eyes of honorable courts, the investigation of ED would carry more prominence because it is investigating, like you said, a larger picture.
I think the courts are mindful that in case there is somebody who is saying that yes, there's a money laundering issue, the courts are very mindful. Having said that, they also understand the other side. So suppose I have uh, a, a justifiable case, the courts is also very mindful of that. Recent past, there were bank officials who were involved in a criminal conspiracy. This is, I think, a Bangalore case. And there was an attachment. Of course, it pertains to pre-2009. So, so the act, of course, is not in the current form and manner. But the courts were very clear that yes, we understand you have investigated. There's an FIR against the officials as well. But at the same point in time, you can't say that the bank will be deprived of its security. The SARFAESI procedure had been triggered in that particular matter. And the court said that, listen, you can't really trigger this completely because the bank is also dealing with public money. It is not that it is dealing with something extraneous. So I think courts are doing a very nice balancing job, and they are extremely mindful that what needs to be very severely looked at, and where there is reasons to believe that somebody actually didn't have knowledge, had done a diligence of sorts, maybe treated differently, has to be looked at very differently. So the courts are extremely mindful on that.
Let's talk about the current challenges of PMLA. They have to grapple with now with digital payments and crypto transactions.
Yeah.
So these are some of the very big challenges the authorities are facing.
Yes.
What do you say about it? How do you how you are looking at the situation currently, and what kind of
So
steps is required now going forward?
I know of this particular matter in which I think we were also discussing in the past that I think $500,000 cryptocurrency, and there was a reference made by an international by a nation abroad to the Indian authorities, and the matter was taken up in India. And the person had said that the predicate offense never occurred in India. So how is it that the PML authority is enjoying as much power, but the courts were very clear. The courts were very mindful that it really doesn't matter in case the offense was something which would have been an offense here, and in case the law would have been applicable, then listen, you have no place to run. And that's how the courts are, if you ask me, living up to it completely. They're very serious about it. They know you can't really. They understand the global play of this particular law, and they understand it very well. They understand what may be a right thing and what somebody is doing may not be right. And the courts are also very, very mindful in all that. The narrative in that particular judgment is so clear that it's not that just because it has happened. If I'm not wrong, it happened in the US of some $500,000 cryptocurrency worth. And this fellow said that, listen, the predicate offense is nothing to do with India, then it's just not applicable. The courts are very clear, doesn't work like that at all. And I'm assuming that, this is that whole chapter on the whole reciprocal arrangements. It's going to play out. We already have, I think, 40 odd such arrangements with various nations. And that's going to play out because we have also seen how many people have uh, laundered money and flown to nations. I think India is very seriously trying to do a lot of activity, and we have made some considerable progress within the legal framework. And in times ahead, I'm certain that these cases will be very successfully handled, and we'll create narratives of our own that how we were able to also get things done. And our
So
economy is not something that you can take for granted that you do an act and just vanish into thin air. So I think the court as well as the legislature, both the judiciary and the legislature, have been very mindful, and that dynamic nature of this law possibly is a degree more than law itself. Any other law, every law is evolving, contracts are evolving, cryptos are a new generation thing. India is dealing with it in a different manner altogether, fair enough. But the fact is that the legal process is also, in tandem.
Yeah. So let's say someone commits a money laundering offense here and runs abroad, right? So what is that ED has to follow? What is the procedure has to follow as per the provisions of PMLA to come to, trial and closure?
So it has to make a reference to that particular nation, and it has to showcase that why is it money laundering that has happened in India. And in terms of the reference, it has to make this application to the respective body abroad, and then the due process is followed. Where you have to make a representation, your cases, your evidence is laid out, and that's how you're able to build your case. Of course, then that particular nation will have its own set of things, and that representation will continue.
So what kind of powers they have, the authority, whether they can do seizure of assets with coordination with authorities in abroad?
The seizure, as the law says, of equivalent value in India, that provision is there. So it's a huge deterrent that comes into play immediately. That if some asset has gone, and if the money has left, the equivalent quantum can be attached in India. But having said that, yes, it's a journey. You can get the person back and trace that whole tracing. It's a time consuming affair.
Continue.
It's a time consuming affair, because these people, I mean, all such people who are doing are also very mindful of how to cover their tracks. So you have this whole narrative of multiple entities and layers, which is why layering is such a big problem. And to undo it, you have to peel one layer out. It's like an onion. You have to take one thing out of the other, one thing out of the other, and that's how they connect the dots. And a lot of credibility to our system, that there are people who are able to do that. There are people who are able to trace as much.
Yeah, yes, Indian investigation is known for that in that manner. The tracing part, building the whole story, is something Indian authorities are known for. How about the reverse side? How international authorities interact with Enforcement Directorate? Let's say there's a money laundering offense which has taken place in India, and
Abroad, and
yeah,
a
yeah,
person has come to India, like the case I was telling you. So there was a reference made, and
yeah.
I think it's the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is responsible, which is the central point, and a reference is made there. And then the ministry makes a reference to the special court under this act, and the court then sees whether the offense would have been an offense under the Indian law, and whether the person would have been punished under the Indian scheme of things. If these are all tick marked, then yes, the courts will give that order, and which is what happened in that matter as well, of cryptocurrency that we were just discussing. Exactly the same case. The person just came here, but the money laundering had happened somewhere else entirely. So the courts were very happy to give that order. Again,
So, what are the defenses available to individual and companies in money laundering cases? Now, like firstly, let's say, EDs presenting accused in the special court on a ECIR, and what is the normal perception a special court has, and then how does the accused proceed, be it individual or companies, to defend their case
so
in practical life? Because I'm sure you have, you have been
yeah,
part of cases.
no, no, of course. See, institutions, individuals will be dealt differently, and the law also deals with them differently, like any other law. For an individual, typically, they would be the first thing I would assume is that a lack of knowledge, the lack of the intent, what is mens rea in classical criminal jurisprudence, that in case somebody is able to showcase that there was no intent to do a criminal activity and is able to showcase that with maybe the business processes that they follow, the activities that they do, and how far they are from the illicit activity, so to say, then that's like the fundamental defense I think anyone as an individual would want to take. Then at times the process, because there are officers who are doing so, the process that has been followed, the validity, the whether there's a consistency in the prosecutions, what is the evidence that the prosecution is putting forth. That is again another thing which typically comes in very handy. Uh, then the kind of evidence that you're able to build together, whether you are able to showcase, say, tax invoices, whether you are able to show that the trail of money that was there at your end was absolutely clean. So typically, that is what comes in very handy from an individual's perspective to showcase that yes, while something would have happened, there is something that is being investigated, but the individual in concern uh, was very clear that his or her acts were absolutely clean. As far as companies, because the section, I think section 70, if I'm not wrong, deals with the companies and people with knowledge. So the companies will have to show that so and so did not have the knowledge, and in a company's case you'll have to possibly also show policies, which is why in companies, the adherence to anti-money laundering in, say, banks and regulated entities, know your customer guidelines, whether you have done the paperwork, whether things are in order or not. That will show whether there was responsibility that can be attributed to the enterprise, so to say. Uh, the other example that I was talking earlier, where there was a mortgage that was enforced and there were officials who were already, there was action taken by the bank. Uh, so there could be the similar narrative even for companies where an employee has gone rogue. There is no corporate mandate of a particular person to act in a particular way, but a given person has gone rogue. So that's also a company can take as a position where it can initiate its own investigation and also report that there's something which is absolutely out of the ordinary.
So in that case, the where the liability falls, or the employee who has gone rogue will have to defend itself,
Yeah,
and company can take.
will be prosecuted. The company will possibly be able to showcase that it's not the company which is at fault. It is one person who has gone bad.
Got it. If you can share an interesting case around PMLA, about PMLA, you have seen in your years of experience.
I've been involved
Brief.
in a lot of cases actually of under the PMLA.
Apart from the ones where you have involved, because I understand you have confidentiality
I
clause,
have, yeah,
client
that's,
relationship.
I was just going to say that, of course, but some of them are reported. But keeping that aside, like the one that I told you, where there was an arms drop matter, and the seller had got some money, parked it into real estate, did a transaction, and this gentleman who was buying bought it on the basis of some money he had saved from standard savings, the way you and I save our money, and had taken a loan. Now, after 10 years, this property was attached. This person had no understanding, and we, as a lender, also, of course, couldn't have fathomed that the seller acquiring the property from an arms drop is something which no banker would possibly have checked. But yeah, that is something we had to handle. We had to defend ourselves because our mortgage was, of course, again, any bank's money is again a depositor's money, like you and I. So this can't be subjected to that. Thankfully, we were able to get some kind of stay and then move forward. We were successful in that matter. But yes, you have to showcase your case very clearly. Similarly, in big ticket cases, the I mean, what really happens is that the offender has left the country and gone, and the local people are fighting. So we had one set of lenders maybe you'll be able to ascertain, who had given money against the brand of a particular enterprise. Unfortunately, their due diligence or whatever be the process were found to be lacking, as a result of which the entire exposure was open. And we, for all our wisdom, had stayed away and done what we do. Being a housing finance company, we had taken a leverage on the assets of the enterprise. And we were able to showcase that. The authority said that, listen, because this money has gone out, so we need to move against equivalent value of assets which is there in India. So came to us that we are attaching your mortgage. And here was a mortgage which was created in favor of my enterprise at least 10 years even before the law came in.
Oh,
So we had to fight this matter, and we went through the motions. We went to the appellate authority, where we were at the Supreme Court as well. And yeah, we said that, it's just that the two sets of institutions, and both are regulated entities. We are kind of creating a narrative against the money laundering authority, and the court also asked the authority that, listen, what will you do at the end of the day if the mortgage is there, if the mortgage has been invoked? Then they need to enjoy that money, because that's also public money that has to be recovered. At the end of the day, we are all sitting here. I mean, who has gone rogue has gone rogue, left the country, taken the money away. So then the court has to do a very interesting balancing act. It's a very tough thing, and nobody's right, nobody is wrong. It's just that the narrative has played out very differently. It could have been very easily exactly the other way around, because what is right at a particular moment, you do not know in future how is it going to play out. As they say, hindsight is always perfect.
yep.
It just happened that we were on the right side of things. Our processes were in place, and thankfully court saw merit in what we were doing. Otherwise, you could have been left high and dry. And these are big tickets, these are not small loans. These are multiple thousands of crores, and they can really hit an institution very hard, which in turn, if you're an institution of repute, um, it can have an impact on the economy itself. So thankfully, even your judiciary is extremely mindful, and they see through these things, they understand, they appreciate, and they are very balanced in their approach when these things are dealt with. I'm actually trying to hold back names, but I'm very certain that some of it would have got through the. Then
Uh,
again, another set of institutions which had multiple layers, where a certain set of individuals were profiteering. Uh, in this case, we again were back with real estate, and in the real estate, we had a clear stream of income which was assigned to us. We were thankfully able to showcase our case to the Supreme Court, that while there was an unlawful gain to a certain set of people, but thankfully we were able to cast ourselves uh, differently. As I said, this could very easily have been a very different narrative altogether. We could have been sitting on that side, and that side could have been sitting on this side.
yeah,
Because the person who has gone rogue, it really doesn't
doesn't
matter,
matter.
institution A, B, or C, and whether it's official, the judiciary, or whoever is looking at it, it doesn't matter. They know they've played the game, they were ahead of the curve, and they were big names. All of the names were very big names, marquee names, that the entire industry respected and saluted. But it's only when later in time you realize what narrative was. So it's very, very critical. Again, coming back to how the institutions have to be very mindful about their policies, and how stringently are they applying their policies in their day-to-day activity, is very, very critical.
So do you?
Otherwise, sorry, no, otherwise you can be just high and dry. You really don't know who has played your system, and that's exactly the issue with money laundering. You do not want your system, your country to be played with. Your country at a larger scale, your own individual enterprise at a smaller scale. That is the problem with money laundering. You do not want to be showcased as somebody who's non-serious, someone
Uh,
who's non-attuned, somebody who's very happy to be played with. People come in, pass in, and everything is all hunky-dory just because the money moved through your systems and you were not able to catch that a rogue, so to say. Thankfully, India has been very, very mindful, and even the biggest names have fallen, so to say. And the good enterprises are today standing by themselves. They are with all their reputation intact, and the bad, the rotten eggs, the rotten apples have been, taken out.
This leads me to the last question. So, do you see now the kind of cases you have? I know what cases you're talking about. What are the cases you're talking about? So, do you see these cases happening again in India going forward? Given that we had, the authorities had bad experience and government has been mindful now, and we had a lot of, progress with IBC as well in, liquidation related cases. Right. So do you see these kind of cases happening more in future? And also based on that, do you how would you say PMLA will evolve over the, let's say, next decade, given the
Decade is
new
a long way.
challenges? Or let's
Decade is
say,
a long way. For PMLA, decade is a long way. You're suddenly seeing digital arrests.
yeah.
Money is moving somewhere from one place to another place in a blink of an eye. I am very certain that this law will evolve faster with, as much of AI is coming in, the kind of progress that you're seeing in the on the web, with the kind of new ways in which people are happy to cheat others. This is only going to evolve faster than before. It'll always be a cat and mouse kind of a narrative. Thankfully, I again say, we as a nation, the judiciary as well as the legislature, have been extremely mindful. They have been extremely nimble footed. We have seen as many amendments in the law. The judiciary has also respected all the changes that has since happened. But it will always be a catch up. Anyone who's rogue is going to be ahead of the system, will try to find a flaw within the system and make a quick buck out of it. But it is the integrity of our system that will always help us in curtailing these cases to the bare minimum. And having said that, it is these instances that also make your system stronger. You always learn that, what went wrong in case A, and how well do you evolve yourself to avoid that same situation going forward. But it's always a Tom and Jerry kind of a
Yeah.
situation where somebody is ahead, somebody is chasing. Sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not. But largely, I think we as a nation have been extremely mindful of this particular issue. It is a nuisance, it's a new world nuisance. And with the dark web and things just going, the data, I don't know how will the data uh, 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 processes, data integrity, and the entire thing which is getting onto the dark web play with the traditional understanding of money laundering. That will also be seen. I'm very certain all these things, the narratives will keep on getting created day in, day out. You and I will be here, we'll observe this. We'll discuss this maybe another point in time.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm very certain this is a very highly evolving landscape. It is not going to be a standard set of things the way we have known, say, mortgages for like donkey years. You know what's a mortgage. It's not going to be that case. It's going to be evolving by the day. The more technology comes in, there are going to be new layers to this, and we will have to up our game as much uh, to know. Thankfully, the officers are extremely sharp. The kind of work that they do, the kind of hours that they put in, there's a lot of hard work. You have to salute them. it is unbelievable the kind of work that these people do, the way they go through the systems, the way they trace the trail of the proceeds of crime, how they add up every case, and the kind of dots that they join is mind-boggling. I am I'm full of respect for all these people who do that job. It's a very tough job. It's a very time-consuming job. At times, one may feel even thankless, but what they end up doing is amazing, and they are silent workers. They do not come up, in the limelight. They stay behind and they do their work meticulously, which is why I think even the FATF has recognized in their last year's report that India has made tremendous strides as far as combating the issue of money laundering, and they applaud India to that extent, the kind of work that we have done. So I'm very certain we are also going to evolve, and so is the problem. The problem will also evolve.
No, yeah, we definitely have to talk further on, the evolvement of KYC processes, right? Policies, and another point, which topic which are fond of is data, data of not just customers but companies, vendors. So there's a whole set of uh, um, you can say changes we look at in the law, keeping in mind the newer challenges which are coming up. Something definitely we should catch up on in our next podcast. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. It was extremely insightful. Please share your feedback in the comments, and if this video has helped you, please share with someone who may need it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajiv, for having me here.